We're going to be talking a little bit about dynamic pricing. And it really is somewhat the outcome of some of the AI discussions I was mentioning earlier. Because if you can do good analysis around big data and you understand your customer, then the next stage is, do you provide that customer unique pricing? So I just wanted to kind of set the stage with just a very few slides, much fewer than earlier today. But some of them are similar. So we have big data, large amounts of data, as if you were attending my last session. And we have structured data, and we have lots of unstructured data. And the unstructured data is really some of the personal preferences of people through social media often. And so trying to understand that and incorporating that into dynamic pricing is important. And then, what consists of personalized dynamic pricing. You're really talking about what I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is smart data. So you're trying to deliver a price to a customer, whether you're an airline, whether you're a tour operator, whether you're a travel agent, that really reflects their value to you as a supplier or retailer. And that is the ultimate goal of dynamic pricing. It's a nice kind of thought process. It's a nice goal. I did a study, which is available on my website, if you can dig through all the different studies I've written over the last 22 years, called Airline Customer Experience Management. And that was a theme of that study. I did interviews for airlines around the world, and everyone was on board. We want to collect information at every touch point, every place where the customer touches us, and then we want to deliver personalized information, including personalized pricing, to all our customers. And that was I think, 4 years ago. Moving forward, I think when we have our conversation, you'll see that some of this has become reality. But there are, just to kind of close out my section here, there are some challenges relative to this. Some of them are pretty obvious. Some of them are maybe a little bit more subtle. The most important thing is kind of understanding that full 360-degree view of the customer. Do you have enough information from enough sources to really know that this dynamic pricing is personalized to that individual? And then there's conflict there. If you're an airline or a hotelier, you have established revenue management already in place. I mean, I have to tell you, some years ago, I spoke at a conference it was like a ticketing conference. It was people who had event ticketing, so it was, I think, sponsored by Ticketmaster. But my hometown San Francisco Giants was represented, and they stood up and they said, we want to be like airlines. We want to have dynamic pricing like airlines. So in a way, we have been the model through airlines and through hotel and revenue management of doing dynamic pricing already, but what's changing? What changes when we talk about personalization? And we're going to talk to Kartik about that a bit. And then, what's the priority? Is it their status and loyalty? Is it their social influence? Is their past history? This person had a bad flight. This person had a bad stay at the hotel. This person had a bad tour experience or had some other bad travel experience. Do we want to then shift pricing and make it dynamic to that person? And then what really is this dynamic pricing versus what we're doing already? And last is confusion. Is it going to be a type of situation where the actual traveler will be trying to figure out, where did they come up with this? Why am I getting this? And what if you have a situation and it's a corporate travel scenario where a director of a company gets a special deal because they travel more than their vice president, and the vice president travels and they don't get as good of a deal? Well, what does that mean? So there's a lot of issues around this, and we're going to have just a brief discussion about this, but hopefully you'll find it interesting. So I think the next step is we're going to have a question here. I didn't bring my piece of paper, so I'm going to have to, there we go. So we want to ask, basically, what's your opinion of the travel industry, using price, differentiation, oops, where are we there? Oh, Did we move to a different one? Okay. So the travel industry today is already using price differentiation to a considerable extent, in which the direction, which is the direction development heading in the future. Would you say that innovations such as artificial intelligence enable personalized pricing, and this will be used more strongly in the future, or our industry has exaggerated price differentiation will be less applied in the future than is today? Answer one, if, I'm sorry, is that a right thing to say culturally? I don't know if ups and downs are good culturally. I always forget about hand symbols. If you agree positively about the subject, hit 1. If you don't think it's overblown, hit 2, and then we'll look at the results in a sec. You have the little voting things there on your chair. And now we have the voting music. Do you think this musician actually thought, I'm going to create this music, it's going to be voting music? I don't know. Okay, and it sounds like people think that it's going to be important. That's pretty clear here. So I'd like to invite up on stage we've had some challenges today. As you may know, I was not the original moderator here. We were supposed to have 2 other panelists as well as in the earlier session, so forgive us. And yeah, I think this is a great example of somebody willing to step in and do it himself. This is Kartik Yellowpetty, and he is the managing director of Sabre Iceland. But he is a veteran, longtime veteran of pricing, revenue management at Sabre. So he's someone who really knows his stuff, and we'll have a very interesting conversation. Come on up, Kartik. Thank you. All right. So I really think are we missing something? Okay. Okay, we'll fade that out. All right. So we thought we were really going to have a short session, then went into the commercial already, apparently. Okay.
And it's a Sabre commercial. I can't
this is a Sabre commercial.
About it.
Oh, okay. This is intentional. Okay. So I wanted to kind of just tackle this first question of dynamic pricing. The example I used about the San Francisco Giants saying we want to be like the airlines kind of speaks to the fact that there is a lot of dynamic pricing from airlines, from hoteliers, from other people. I mean, I've worked with a lot of tour operators. They do all sorts of interesting pricing on tours if there is high demand or low demand. So, how is what we're talking about today different than what we've had in the past?
And I mean, the way I look at it, there are 2 problems we are trying to solve here. One is dynamic pricing, and other one is personalized pricing. And sometimes we mix them together, and as a result of it feels like we're talking about something new. I think we do a great job as an industry of pricing to what we believe is the right price at that point in time. But I think the industry is evolving to a point where can it be done further? Can we start looking at the personal aspects of the context of the trip or the context of the person who's actually shopping and see if we can bring that into the price itself. So I would say we do dynamic pricing now. It's more about personalization that we are here to talk about.
There's a lot of factors that go into pricing right now, right? So
yeah.
So in this new world of more personalized pricing, what's going to be the main source of data? So we were talking about the fact that we have loyalty, we have past trip thing. What do you think is going to win out as far as what kind of blend of information is going to be needed?
I would like to answer this in 2 parts. I think first of all, we need to understand what is the problem that we are trying to solve before talk about the data that can solve the problem. And as I was mentioning, it's about the context. What is the context of the shop itself? What is the context of the customer who's shopping? What is the context of the past experience of this customer? What is the context of the market? Again, you can have a personalized price, and you can pretty much give great service at no price. So the context of monetization is also important. Am I making money out of this transaction or not as an airline or as a travel agent? That's going to be important. So I think first, it's about defining what personalized price means, and then getting the data in. And in terms of data, we collect a lot of data. I mean, we have a lot of data today, right? Airlines have this data. The problem is they're in silos. The operations data, where the customer experienced something bad, is in one piece. The customer missed a bag, that's in another piece of the airline. And there is also loyalty information, which is sitting in another silo. So I think the first step that we are trying to solve is, how do I link all this data in real time and make it accessible to every touch point? So that's the first step. And then the second step is, how do I enrich this data with more information? So we are looking at collecting shopping data. We collect about 1 terabyte of shopping data every day. Anytime an agent out there is shopping on our system, we record that. And that may not be enough, but I think there is enough now, and the key is start using it, start creating that personal price, and then figure out what else do I need to collect.
So obviously the other side of that is, let's say we're in a world of personalized dynamic pricing. How do you mitigate some of the traveler confusion and some of the kind of disruptive elements that may channel in the distribution channel, so that if an airline offers a dynamic price to a customer who's also the customer of a travel agent or a tour operator or a corporate customer or TMC, how do you balance that all out?
I mean, I'm a big fan of transparency. I think it starts with that, to build trust. That's the only way to solve this problem. The customer should believe that by revealing more information, they are getting a better price. There is no two ways about that, which means we may have to take an extra step to explain what you would get if you did not tell us who you are, and then anchor that and show how much discount you're getting because you have told us who you are. So I think, and that comes through transparency. It boils down to the very fact of how we display this information. It cannot be confusing. It boils down to what other people are paying. There are many ways that airlines, OTAs have tried to solve this problem, but that's a key idea here, that you have to build that trust and confidence. It happens over time. And if there is bad press around the fact that you have increased price for some wrong reason, it's going to take a long time for it to go.
And when we were prepping for this interview, I remember there was this instance of one of the online travel agencies actually giving a higher price to people who were on Apple computers versus PCs. That didn't go over too well.
Yeah, it won't.
So there's definitely that element of that. Can you talk a little bit more about Sabre and what you're actually doing as far as using AI, in order to drive more personalized pricing?
Sure. So again, first step, as you mentioned in your speech this morning and also on one of your slides, the most important thing for us is, how do we collect data? And data that can train these AI machine learning algorithms. So we spend a lot of time in making sure we collect information, and especially how people are using that information, because that's what is going to tell us what the customer's behavior is. So there's a lot of work happening in data gathering, collection, linking, breaking these silos that are within the airline, and even frankly within the industry, because the travel agent's data, you don't want to share with the airline. The airline's data, you don't want to share with travel agency. And as a customer, I feel like it's my data. It's not really a travel agent's or airline's data. So there's this whole concept of breaking these silos. We really care about that. And I think that is the biggest problem that is out there. I think tools are available to solve. And in terms of using AI, we are experimenting with machine learning algorithms to see what should the new pricing mechanism be? What should be the new way of doing revenue management? Because it's all about experiment. There are so many factors today that could influence the price, like including fuel prices could influence your price. It's impossible to build a forecaster and optimization and say, yeah, this is the price. It has to be a mixture of those data-driven decisions and trial and error. So that's where we are using machine learning. Another area where we are using machine learning, or at least doing some research, is how analysts are doing revenue management. What actions that people take result in positive revenue impact, and then go back and say that, okay, these actions resulted in good revenue, these actions result in bad revenue, so how do you learn from that and suggest what you can do.
I'm smiling because I'm thinking if I'm a revenue manager and you're tracing my actions as being good or bad, and then you're emulating only the good ones, I may be out of a job soon. You know, we're talking about AI maybe replacing human beings. I mean, is there a sense of, seriously, is there a sense of threat from revenue management people that the machine is going to replace what they do?
I don't think so. So we are doing it for two reasons. So first of all, it's going to assist you as a revenue management analyst, saying, hey, that other analyst there, he just did something very cool that brought money to you. So here is an idea of what you could do given the same situation. People don't talk to each other. Very surprising, right?
Yeah,
and then so I see that is one thing. So it's more of assisting. But at the same time, we're trying to take the levers out. We're trying to see how the analyst can focus on that needle in the haystack and let the system run. And that's been the premise of revenue management since its inception. So
there's lots of support from revenue.
there is lots of support, and you don't have to know that there is this event happening.
So I know you work in the airline solutions group, but there's also a hospitality solutions group and so forth. Is similar type of things happening at Sabre, where you're looking at revenue managers who work at hotels and trying to adapt their best practices? It's just a much more distributed environment in a hotel.
Yes,
scenario.
but absolutely. I think the core models remain the same. I mean, I myself am responsible for cargo revenue management, for rail revenue management, and airline revenue management. So we try to make sure when we solve a problem, it's across multiple industries. Because I mean, our optimizer that runs even today was written for Hilton. So you can think.
There we go. Have you had any experience in kind of more of the travel agency side or the tour operator side of the business, or do you think that there's applicability for what we're talking about with dynamic pricing within those fields?
Yeah, I think so. I think dynamic price is something, as I said, I think it's more about the personalization of the price.
Okay.
And for that, the first thing we have to see is how we figure out a way for information exchange so that you can truly personalize the price. I think that is going to be the biggest challenge that we're going to face as we roll this out. And I also see, I mean, I looked at your challenges. I think one other risk, if I may add to that list of challenges from a supplier side, is going to be about the lack of transparency I have on what my competition is offering. Yeah. So now imagine a world where you and I are airlines and we are both pricing analysts. At least right now I know what you're charging somewhat based on ATP Co, and you might have private fares, I don't know about that. But tomorrow in dynamic pricing world, you could be charging something I don't know what you're charging because I don't have access to that information. My natural tendency is to drop the price, and you're going to try to drop the price as well. And there's a risk of, and airlines worry about that, and we worry about that too. So we are trying to see how we make sure when we build these kind of technologies, we don't get to a point where two machines are just racing to the bottom. That's a very legitimate challenge.
It seems like it's definitely going to be an ongoing issue when price becomes less transparent across all the different channels. So what about government oversight? Because I know from a U.S. perspective, there's been a lot of rulings about fairness with display and fairness and transparency and all this. Even we'll talk about NDC in a moment, but even whether NDC is somehow going to remove transparency. And I would think that in other markets around the world, there's also concern about privacy and whether or not you're using personal information in order to maybe offer a dynamic price, but you should not be using that information. That's private. So how do you overcome the governmental issues?
I mean, see, first of all, I think there will be less governmental issues because now it's algorithmic pricing systems deciding on the price. So there's opportunity to leave enough traces, enough evidence as to how and why you got to that point. So I don't see that as a huge challenge. At the same time, we have to see how governments would react to this. I mean, if the government believes in free trade and they've unregulated the market, I'm sure they're just going to worry about a few levers as such.
And then, I had a slide which said, here are the challenges of dynamic pricing, but I should have had a slide also, what's the opportunities of dynamic pricing? So maybe if you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think the verdict is out there. We have to see what the value is. But see, the way we look at it from a personalized pricing perspective. So first of all, personalization cannot be looked at in silo with just pricing. Personalization is about the entire experience, and then pricing is just one step to it. And then execution is also important. If you promise something, how do you deliver? So we look at personalization end to end, not just about personalized pricing. And our technology and the way we want to build these products is keeping personalization across the ecosystem, from marketing to selling. And the other aspect is, I think there's opportunity to do personalized pricing even today, because pricing analyst, if you talk to any pricing analyst at an airline, the process is very, very manual. Right? All they're doing is that looking at a price that the competition is offering. You go ask them, hey, why do you have that Saturday night stay? I don't know. It's been there for 15 years, so I still have that fare out there, and Delta has that fare, so I also want to have that fare. But do you really need a Saturday night stay restriction in the market? There is enough information today to be strategic about your price. What are people shopping? What product am I offering? What product is my competition offering? And what people are buying? If you look at this, you could personalize the price even today to a certain extent, maybe not down to a single individual, but to a targeted segment in a given market. So I think we want to do that first. We want to make sure we change the way the pricing analyst works today and operates today, and harness some of the shopping data, and then get into more dynamic aspects of personalization. And our studies have shown just doing better pricing strategically could bring up to 1% revenue improvement at an airline.
So that makes a big difference. So as far as all the NDC talk, the new distribution capability from IATA, how does that relate to the subject we're talking about? Is that a vehicle to drive this? Is that, I mean, it's really essentially just an XML standard. So what it's doing, it's bringing out all these additional ancillary services, not just price, but other things for bundling. So is there a role that NDC plays in this from an airline perspective?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I think NDC has a role to play, but it would be not right to assume that NDC would completely revolutionize distribution, because that is just a standard, and we have to worry about all the data science behind it. We have to make sure there is direct channel, there are different channels through which, different devices through which people purchase. All that is also going to be as important as a standard. And yeah, so Sabre has been committed to NDC. We were one of the first ones to bring the preferred seat sale at American Airlines through NDC. And so yeah, absolutely. We are committed to make sure that we solve the problem, which is how do we get that personalized price to the customer.
So often with the way that we have the travel industry value chain set up, there's a lot of kind of inherent conflict on who owns the customer. Is it the retailer? Is it the distributor, the wholesaler, the supplier? And I was wondering, do you think that this is going to worsen that fight around who owns the customer, or is there some way, I guess I'm being a little bit utopian here, but some way we could all work together so that the ultimate customer receives better service and better prices because we all share some level of information? Which side do you think is going to win on this? When we,
I think ultimately the customer wins.
I hope so.
So which and the industry and everybody is going to figure out how to make that problem solve. But it is a valid problem. I'm a big believer in democratizing the data. So we just have to figure out how to solve the problem. But that is real. There is that lack of trust across the industry.
So we didn't have a chance in the other session to open it up to any questions. Do you have any questions in the audience that on this topic, specifically from your, do we have a microphone that someone can steal here? We'll get it in a second. So, because I didn't do audience polling to try to figure out who's here, but I would think that we have some hoteliers, some tour operators, maybe some DMOs. I don't know if we have any airlines in here. Do we have any airlines? The airlines, there's one airline back there, okay. You're not, you're not at the airport trying to solve the strike, right? Okay. So what's the other mixture? Do we have some folks from the, I'm sorry, hotels? Okay. So is there, I'm sorry? Okay.
Broker.
Yeah, the broker. Okay. Consumers. Okay. So from a hotelier perspective, do you have any questions about
I think
how?
there's a question there.
Oh, there is a question. Thank you. I'm sorry. Let's take the question from the floor. I'll have to ad-lib. Sorry.
Hi. You talked about pricing and being transparent. I think a lot of people suspect now that there's price discrimination rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how are you going to handle that? Because I travel a lot. I travel on planes. I travel on trains. They're going to be holding data on me all over the place. And there's cookies on my website, all sorts of things. They know I have to use these lines of communication. Yeah. So wouldn't they price discriminate against me? And I actually feel that there are some operators doing this. I've actually eliminated the cookies, gone back in, got a different price. So how's that going to be handled? Because I don't like that. So I'd rather not give personal data if that's going to happen.
Yeah, you don't like it because you are worried that the price would increase.
I'm not worried. I've proved it.
Yeah. So you've proved it that price increases when you delete those cookies. My point is,
No,
I think
he was saying the reverse. He says that the cookies cause them to pay higher prices.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. So that has to change.
I'm not getting loyalty from this, you know, because they know I have to travel every weekend from one place to another on an airline, for example. And if they know I have to stay in a place, for example, we know about the algorithm that says, okay, the later that you book a hotel, the more chance you pay more, especially if they've reached their point of utilization or break even, if you like. Yeah. So with all these factors in mind, you know, surely this data is going to legislate against the customer, not for them.
So again, that's the point I'm trying to make. That's a very valid concern, and airlines have to, and hoteliers, they have to figure out a way to solve this. And the way to do it is only by gaining trust, that when you have that cookie, it's actually cheaper than more expensive. And they have to prove that to the industry, individual by individual if required, or through...
But it's more than the cookies, isn't it? Because when you talk about personalization, you're talking about a whole raft of other stuff. You talk about data protection, you talk about some people like to keep things private because they don't want people knowing too much about them, not because of any other reason, and they just feel, well, it's free information, and then they'll start pricing accordingly. I mean, this has been proven by insurance companies that I know actually trawl Facebook, and they actually know people's health before they even ask them. So there's all this kind of stuff going on at the moment. So some of this data that you talk about, the big data and all the rest of it, you know, personalization, it depends how it's used. Mm-hmm. It can be easily used to discriminate against customers as well as work for them. So I'm just saying that's the challenge. I mean, how are you addressing that?
So it is a challenge, and the way to address it, as I said, is to build technology that does not allow that to happen, and put processes within an airline or within a hotelier so that that does not happen. I can't think of any other way of solving it than gaining the trust back of the customer.
Question here?
So I'll pass it on like a. I'll do the. It's a bit like a 400-meter race.
Yes.
Hello. The question here is that how can hotels use the revenue management system collecting data from a marketing perspective? So how do they do it today? And is it a possibility to collect more data from a marketing perspective?
From a marketing perspective, as in the promotions that you run and the data that comes out of that, or
yes, to personalize the price in the most efficient way. I mean.
Yeah. See, I think 2 elements to that, right? I don't think the revenue management systems or analysts can really control the personalization. That's a very hard problem to solve for a human being. It should be left to the machines because there are just so many factors. But what is important for a revenue management analyst of the future to decide is what is that anchor price for that segment, for that market. That's how we are looking at it, saying that this is the anchor price. And then the personalization aspect layers on top of it, which decides what kind of discount you want to give to that anchor price. So, and there's more data that you can collect to make a better decision on that anchor price, which is not personalized to a single individual, but personalized to a segment, a group of people. I think that's how we are looking at that problem.
Thank you. I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm just thinking what is personalized. The situation today being where do I buy is if I go to a meter engine, I try and find the cheapest seller of a hotel or a flight. That's my behavior. Yeah. Then, for example, Accor they write me twice a week in order to be a loyal Accor buyer. The latest thing is the Norwegian, the airline, stops me at the airport asking if I fly Norwegian. And Norwegian at the moment gives me rewards points, but now they want me to have a bank card. And the thing about the bank card is that if I sign at the airport, I get 1,000 points. And then I can rent money for nothing until I'm too late. Still, I'm thinking what I'm doing is working for a small organization, buying air tickets to Eastern Europe. And I buy on price because I can move people for 1 day or 2 days. And I have some idea in my head if I want to fly LOT or Lufthansa, or I have like 5 airlines. And I know the people that I buy tickets to. But in this diffused world, what is then personalized? What are you talking about? Relation that I just try and find cheap flights to Eastern Europe for a dozen people.
So I think personalization is 2 aspects. So one, it is about understanding what you prefer. If you prefer the cheapest flight, getting out from A to B, that's what is the personalized price for you. Versus that's
on my IP address. That's not on whom I'm buying a ticket for. It's on my computer address. What you're talking about, my IP number.
No, not really your IP number or your frequent flyer membership number with that airline if you're shopping with that airline. But the personalization has 2 components. One, what is the right product? Whoever is trying to sell it to you, what is the right product that is to be offered to you so that you take that product? Because there are millions of combinations at which you could really bundle things and sell to you. The second thing is, given what airlines know about you and your experience and how much they value you and understand your value system, how would they come up with a price that will make sure you would buy? That's really what personalization is about here.
I always think about the film Minority Report. I don't know if you remember that. It was from the 90s. But there's one scene where he's walking through a mall, and he's bombarded with all sorts of ads and they're all personalized. Yeah. You like this, and you like this, and that's what that horror of personalization is. I think besides being charged more money than having price gouging when there's high demand, they know that you're going to have to pay for it. That's the other aspect which you're bringing out, which I think is a real concern when we talk about personalization. Yes, sir.
You touched on a couple of points, one of them which really strikes a raw nerve here. The person that finds that fare from 10 years ago, and of course Sabre, unfortunately last year might have been the last year when you really had good creative pricing. The last one was on December 23rd, when one certain airline wiped up all their 6,000-mile ticketing deduction allowances in 1 day. Took them 10 years to catch up. But being from San Francisco, you might remember the Analytic thing. There's a basic dichotomy of distrust between supplier of airlines and distributors, travel agents, simply because everybody's trying to grab that last cent. We've seen that with the focus groups in New York that took the unbundling programs in a very duplicitous manner, so somebody could get $200 just to show up at 5 minutes to 8, and nobody that's ever flown, I mean, they've barely taken the subway, and saying, don't you think it's better that we should separate? And everybody said, yes, 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 except for one thing. This was an advocacy research thing. And I think that still goes on today. We still use, or I still use, for my few clients, we still use 3 different Sabres, 3 different VPNs, simply because it's a cat and mouse game. How can I squeeze the most revenue from you, and how can I try not to squeeze the most revenue? And the machines are definitely catching up. I'll just give one example. With Qatar and with Turkish, they know when I'm experimenting with fares. After 2 times, they block everything for 10 minutes. So in Sabre, so those computers are definitely. To me, it's going to be before things calm down. There's going to be a lot of Sturm und Drang going on for the next couple of years. What are your feelings on that?
No, I'm with you. I mean, we have to make sure we take this. So first of all, I think airlines have to be more strategic about this. If they think about squeezing the last dollar from that transaction, then it's going to be a dangerous game. So it's about the customer and the loyalty of the customer and the long-term value that they can derive out of the customer. So that view is important. But I agree with you. I mean, airlines have to make sure this is rolled out in a very careful way. I mean, it could go any way. There is value there because I can imagine that no 2 people are the same when it comes to what their willingness to pay is for a service, and what they want is different because everybody is looking for their personalized experience. So if I want to deliver that experience, I will also charge you for that experience. That's only fair, but we have to make sure it's done carefully.
I've always, having been in the industry for so many decades, always wonder about what is the definition of the lowest fare. And it's always how hard do you want to work for it? It's not really. Yes, value.
You get the lowest fare, but it's use it or lose it, and all these duplicities. And then for $20 more, you can get a fare. People do change. People breathe. They get up in the morning, and things happen. And so you see it, especially with online travel now. It's a very duplicitous situation where you can get an absolutely no change under any circumstance, especially with KLM and with Delta now with the e-fares. You have a fare $10, $20 higher, and I mean, Al Analik, who I'm sure you know very well, would never have tolerated those type of fares in the old days. So again, how much of it is dynamic pricing, and how much of it is duplicitous pricing? And I don't know if that's a valid question or not, but that's.
I don't know the answer to that.
But absolutely, I agree. And the other thing one has to keep in mind is and that's where the government regulation thing comes up, is this dynamic pricing could result in a lot of bait and switch sort of situations, which also have to be carefully monitored and things like that.
Yeah, sorry to have another question.
No problem.
Just that I have different roles. So my last questions were one role, but I'm also working for Riga Apartments in Riga. We're a small hotel apartment business, and so of course we're very keen to see travelers come to Riga and to obviously stay with us. But we're small. We can't have big banner adverts with the big airlines and with all these kind of people. So when you start talking about all this personalization and the big data and sorting that data, how is it actually going to help the small businesses who actually help the local economies, especially in Eastern Europe, for example, who are trying to catch up with the rest of Western Europe?
I think, see, at the end of the day, personalization is happening at a transaction level. And the key there is if you are able to effectively demonstrate the value that you bring, and you're able to effectively demonstrate effectively connect to the value system that customer has in his or her mind, I don't see this problem as something that smaller companies can do, bigger companies cannot do, or vice versa. I think it is at the transaction level.
It might have an equalization kind of effect. It might make the market more homogeneous. It might have give more equality across the market.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
I agree. Hopefully. That is quite possible.
It's just a question of how that happens and how one can take advantage of it, basically. I mean, it's kind of another question, but how do you feel about that?
Well, it's kind of like knowing your customer, right? I mean, you have certain customers, a certain amount of loyalty of repeat customers. You know where your new customers are coming from, and you just have to figure out how you can use the data in order to demonstrate value. And then, either for repeat, it's much easier to personalize, but for new customers that have similar patterns, you then can learn from those past customers how to acquire new customers. So I think the same theories hold true for small companies. And in a way, the data is smaller in a way. But I think it could be a great equalizer. I don't know if you agree.
I do, but at the same time, the bigger guys have more levers, and you have less levers. So it brings it closer. But some of the problems that exist today in terms of being small and competing with a big player will continue to be there, because this is not trying to solve that problem of equalizing. But I agree, there is a certain amount of equalization that happens at a individual customer level, and then how you take advantage is really what it boils down to.
Do we have any other audience questions? Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up. I mean, it is Friday afternoon, and you, I'm sure, are anxious to start the weekend. So I want to just ask, just to kind of close up here, if you had to have the audience have a key takeaway from this whole idea of personalization and dynamic pricing and so forth, what would be the message for them to think about when they go back to their hotels or go back to their apartments or tour operators or travel agents or airlines? You know, what's the practical application of this stuff today? What should they think about?
I mean, the first thing I would say is you can do personalization today. You don't have to wait for an NDC or a complete revolutionization of how distribution is done to personalize. I would say start with the data, make sure you collect your data, understand who is shopping, and are you offering the right product that is catered to that. And I see a lot of hoteliers, a lot of airlines missing that very basic thing. So I would say step one is to make sure you understand your customers and put some framework in place to see how you can relate to the value system that the customer has. And if I go deep into the old operations research way of looking at it, there's lots of algorithms, there's lots of math that can help you understand that kind of thing. Analyze the data, look at the data that way, and design your products and what you offer to match that value system. And you don't need NDC, you don't need dynamic pricing to do that. And once you have that DNA in your organization in terms of looking at it that way, these things are only going to make things more dynamic and more real time and more machine-based stuff.
Well, let's hope it's a world on the positive side versus the negative side. I think it'll probably be coexisting, as we've seen with the behavior of suppliers and others in the value chain. Kartik, I just want to thank you again for being now the only panelist we end up having. Thank you very much for attending this session late on a Friday afternoon.
Thanks.